Hello, it's a pleasure to have you here. I would like to express my gratitude for you, and I'd like to express my gratitude for your valuable time here attending this webinar. I'd like to extend my heartfelt thank you to the nearly 400 subscribers who joined us for this session, represent 35 different countries. Thank you. Let me present myself. I am Silvia, an electrical engineer with a specialization in industrial automation with 2 decades of experience as an engineer. And I've been working with computer system validation for more than 20 years, so a substantial period. I currently serve as a CEO and I co-founded 5 Validation. The 5 Validation team has had the privilege of serving over 180 clients, primarily offering services in computer system validation, IT in the OT infrastructure qualification, production equipment qualification, utilities qualification, and data integrity projects. In addition to our consultancy services, 5 Validation has developed a cutting-edge software as a service SaaS solution tailored for life science companies. This solution aligns seamlessly with the compliance standards set forth by EMA and the FDA. Our platform empowers organizations to conduct the validation studies up to 5 times faster compared to traditional manual process, whether they are electronic or paper-based. What distinguishes our SaaS platforms and its inclusion of a pre-built library of validation protocols with its software database. These features enables our users to harness ready-made validations, enhancing their process and achieving remarkable efficiency gains, including process and cleaning validations. From day one, our Agile approach to validation compliance empowers our customers' teams. I'd like to welcome Lilian Ribeiro, who is responsible for being QA session moderator. Thank you, Lilian, for accepting my invitation and being here. May I ask you to present yourself?
Okay, thank you, Silvia. Thank you all for being here. I'm Lilian, holding degrees in biomedical system and chemical engineering. Within 5 Validation, I take on the position of sales coordinator as a partner, and I'm also a validation specialist. So thank you for this opportunity. Okay, Silvia, could you open, please, the camera of Jonathan? He can't open the video.
Let me check here. Okay. Let me check what I have to do here. I'm sorry, Jonathan. Can you check if you can share your camera now? Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sorry, Jonathan. I'm so sorry. Okay. I'd like to extend my warm welcome to our colleague, Jonathan Bowell, representing the QBD Group, who join us in this webinar today. QBD Group is currently undergoing a significant transformation by transitioning their validation process into a digital framework. I want to express my sincere gratitude to Jonathan for graciously accepting our invitation to be part of this webinar. Your willingness to share your expertise with our audience is highly appreciated. We also value your trust in 5 Validation as both customer and partner. Without further ado, I would like to invite Jonathan to introduce himself to our audience and shed light on QBD Group's capability and how they can bring value to our attendees.
Thank you, Silvia, for the very warm welcome. And it's always a pleasure to share knowledge, but also to learn from each other, which I think is utmost importance, and we can all still grow and learn from each other. So my name is Jonathan Boel. Within the QBD group, I am the division head for the software services and solution division. My background, I started as an industrial engineer, and for the last 10 years, I've been active within the field of computer system validation, data integrity, implementing quality management systems, whether those were startups, spin-offs, established pharmaceutical companies. I had the luck to learn a lot, see a lot of different flavors, whether it was related towards manufacturing, packaging, distribution, medical devices, or even within clinical research, which allowed me to learn a lot. And I hope I can share a little bit of that knowledge today. So within the QBD group, as I mentioned, I am the division head for software services and solutions. So we offer their services towards computer system validation, data integrity, but next to that, we also have our own solutions. One is SciLife, which is an electronic quality management system. And a second one is IFU Care, and IFU Care is an electronic instruction for use for medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. But once again, Silvia, thank you for the warm welcome.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. I kindly request you, our attendees here, to utilize the QA session here in the Zoom to engage with us and ask your questions. If for any reason you are unable to address all the questions during the session, please rest assured that we are committed to addressing each and every one of them after the event. Additionally, we are open to schedule one-on-one meetings to ensure that everyone here receives answers to their questions. And okay, let's get started. Jonathan, please don't hesitate to interrupt me at any time and contribute with your valuable insights and comments. Please, Lilian, you are totally free to interrupt me as well, okay? Our aim today is to offer an insightful presentation centered around the GAMP5 second edition CSA and the Agile methods. Our mission is to arm you with the comprehensive knowledge on this subject matter, equipping you with the tools, the seamless integrated within your own company. But beyond that, we are eager to emphasize how we can be your partners in navigating the complex landscape of compliance with the utmost efficiency. So let's start with the question, what is computer system validation? Certainly, you may be aware of that. Validation involves generating a series of documents that confirm the proper function of a computer system. This process is crucial as it verifies the suitability of it for a specific process. It's essential to ensure that the computer system adheres to the process. In simpler terms, validation is the study that demonstrates that processes consistently operate with quality. The good news is that regulations worldwide are harmonized, so rules are generally similar across regulatory bodies such as FDA, the European Medicines Agency, EMA, World Health Organization, WHO, and Anvisa, the Brazilian regulatory body. So now let's address the biggest challenge. In the life sciences sector, a single company could find itself contending with more than 100 validations, each involving around 15 documents. Of course, it depends on the size of the company, but sometimes we have hundreds of systems to be validated. Certain processes might even extend the considerable 8-month time frame before reaching completion. We are dealing with a landscape that's intricately bureaucratic, and some companies still are heavily reliant on manual procedures. Can you perceive the complexity inherent in this scenario? so the sheer volume and duration of these validations can be quite overwhelming. Now let's delve into the guideline and the best practices set forth by the International Society for Pharmaceutical Engineering, ISPE. One of ISPE or ISPE's significant contributions is the development of the Good Automated Manufacturing Practice GAMP guideline. Certainly, you may be aware that GAMP is globally recognized as the go-to resource for validating and operating automated systems in the biopharmaceutical industry. GAMP provides a structured framework and the best practices to ensure the integrity and the reliability of computerized system used in manufacturing, quality control, and the other critical processes. It covers the entire system lifecycle, including design, development, implementation, operation, and maintenance. GAMP continues to evolve and adapt to emerging technologies, providing industry professionals with available guidance and the tools to navigate the complex world of automated systems in the biopharmaceutical sector. The GAMP Guide's 50th iteration maintains its commitment to a risk-based approach or methodology for system validation. This approach aligns with the expectations of regulatory bodies within the regulated industry. It emphasizes criticality and the complexity assessments to determine the appropriate level of validation required. The guideline provides detailed guidance on system categorization, supplier assessment, documentation, testing, and the ongoing system maintenance. In 2022, the second edition of GAMP5 publication was released. This updated edition maintains its risk-based approach while embracing innovation and agility. It eliminates rigid components like overly prescriptive templates and extensive procedures, fostering a more flexible and adaptive mindset. CSA, short for Computer Software Assurance, represents an FDA directive released in September 2022, presently available in draft form. The issuance of this preliminary version exemplifies the embrace of regulatory principles, affording the industry a chance to voice its perspectives, encompassing the practicality of adoption by companies. This directive centers its attention on the comprehensive spectrum of the medical device manufacturing process and the quality assurance. Individuals or professionals, validation professionals with extensive experience in the field will recollect that GAMP4 already introduced the concept of functional risk assessment, although it didn't hold a central role in that version. GAMP5 instigated a paradigm shift by making the validation strategy pivot around risk assessment, which become a focal point, interwoven the system categorization, be it off-the-shelf standard, configured, or entirely customized. This marks the first instance, and I can recall where a subsequent edition of the same guide was released, specifically GAMP5 in this context. This likely stems for enduring relevance of risk assessment as the guiding strategy. In this aspect, there is been no alteration. This edition essentially refines its forerunner, bringing into focus aspects that the industry didn't prioritize back in 2008 when GAMP5 was introduced, namely cloud computing, AI, blockchain, critical thinking, and agile methodologies. Differing from the CSA, where in the guide instructs the formulation of a requirement and the subsequent classification in terms of high, mid, and low impact on the process, it doesn't entail distinct deliverables for classifying severity, probability of occurrence, and detectability. Within the CSA framework, the classification solely involves assigning a requirement, a high, mid, and low designation upon which the test strategy is constructed. Notably, the CSA doesn't actively promote the adoption of mitigative measures to decrease risks. Its focus lies on delineate a scope of testing. Conversely, GAMP5 and CSA exhibit a notable alignment regarding both guided and unguided testing methodologies. The concept of unguided tests, however, should not be misconstrued and being undocumented. Instead, it signifies that these tests are suitable for mitigating lower risk without necessitating the pre-approval of scripts before executing them. As time has progressed, IT teams, factory engineering units, and suppliers have come to realize the importance of enhancing test documentation, encompassing comprehensive evidence collection, and the more meticulous record keeping. Another crucial aspect is that both guides promote the utilization of automated tests, which significantly enhance the speed of execution. There are several other details that have changed between the first and second version of GAMP5. I will leave here the indication of a more detailed material of the subject. You can find it in our website, 5validation.com, in the blog section. There are several articles there, but here I'm highlighting the one related to the topic of the lecture. It is interesting to see that blog touches of the fact that validation can be good for business. Doing validation, adopting agile practices can bring us closer to the business areas and demystify a little that validation only brings delays in delivery times and a lot of cost. Validation is good for business because we solve problems before they happen in production. Perhaps it is time to reflect on whether we can change their idea about compliance, that is, to empower companies exporting and gaining market every hour more. Certifications from regulatory agencies are key to allow to market products and export. Imagine if we can keep up with the business need, validating faster, using agile practices, adding value to the business gradually. I am by no means saying that compliance has now become easier. It remains the same. That is, we can only release systems or piece of systems into production after passing the tests. I may just say that there is an opportunity to split the validation into pieces. Okay, Janet, would you be willing to take the lead of the upcoming slides?
Definitely. I would also first like to remind you all, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate, submit them to us. I will come back in the Q&A session, and depending on which questions we didn't touch yet, we can come back to them later. This will really help us to gather your feedback, to see and to have an idea of what's going on in your thoughts, and bring this, let's say, to a more interactive way as possible. Thank you already, Silvia, also for, let's say, your thoughts or general introduction towards computer system validation, how GAMP fits in there and how CSA fits in there. Before I continue going over, let's say, different approaches, different life cycle models, where one way we have the V model, the other way we can have an agile approach. I would like really to highlight the key principles which are defined as part of GAMP5, because if we have a look back at those key principles, they're really not that different as to what, for example, CSA is saying. Main one there, or let's say the first one to start there, is that in whatever computer system validation project assignment you're working on, you should start from the product and process knowledge you have. Start from what you know. And this is nothing else than a critical thinking part, which we'll come back to still a little bit later, which is becoming that more important as part of the CSA approach. Next to that, for other principles, they are there. Be sure to have a scalable approach. One approach doesn't fit every solution. To ensure that it's part of a life cycle, whether that's following a V model, whether that's following an agile approach. Take a risk-based approach, and also there, the risk-based approach together with the product and process knowledge you have, that's what's translated into the critical thinking part. And then the last one, which is also reflected on this slide, where I will go through the V model in a moment. But if I don't try to do everything, I would phrase it even differently. Whenever you're working with a supplier, really lean on that supplier. Leverage the activities the supplier is performing. The way I usually like to say it is be as lazy as possible. Don't repeat things which your supplier already did. Evaluate them to see whether you can leverage them, yes or not. But after that, be as lazy as possible and see to leverage as much of the activities which the supplier already performed. Which brings us to the next subject then, looking towards development lifecycle models. So on the one way we have the V model, on the other way we have the Agile model. If you look at there, and hopefully, and I assume here, and I don't assume regularly, the V model is recognizable for most of you. This is really already translating in a scalable approach from functional specification to hardware design specification towards your system development and construction. Depending your GAMP category, you will have more or less levels to say so, and also different ways of controlling them. And whether you use terminology such as IQ, OQ, PQ, which was first introduced in GAMP4, or you use later terminology such as unit testing, integration testing, configuration testing, functional testing, and user acceptance testing, that's completely up to you to look at that. But know still that whatever lifecycle model you choose, whether it's a V model or the Agile, which will bring me to the next slide, I would say, you can really look there and see which approach you take. One of the key considerations when looking at the Agile method is that it's a lot more interactive. Nevertheless, whether you look at an Agile model or at, let's say, a waterfall model, both approaches still follow one of the key concepts as part of any quality assurance, quality control activity, which is nothing else than the PDCA circle, the Plan, Do, Check, Act. How is that translated when we look here at the Agile method? Well, we're going to plan our activities. We're going to specify what we're going to do. When we know what we're going to do it, which corresponds to our configure and our coding. We're going to verify that the activities were correct, which is to go and check if it was correct. And if there are still issues, we're going to act on it, which can be part of the verification or the reporting phase, where the main difference is we're really taking small circles, rolling forward, growing up the mountain bit by bit, building up our application, being more interactive, having more interaction with the end users. One approach which you could take, following, for example, a Scrum methodology, is working with different sprints, where in every sprint, which is translated in the right slide of the current slide. So in every sprint, you will add some functionalities up to the moment that you will have a certain stabilization sprint and look to only solve the issues you still have. When those issues have been solved, you can go and decide to accept them. And then again, adjust and track reprioritize your features, but adjust and track is just another word to check and act, which is corresponding towards your PDCA cycle and going into your next iterations towards your next sprint actions. If we bring this in a broader lifecycle model, which also will be shown on the next slide, we will see that, and let's say rephrase a little bit the phases which we are known for under a waterfall or V model approach, then we can come to the next model. Know that this is just a suggestion. This is a way of working. If your company is naming it differently, that's completely open and free to have a look at. But everything still there starts with the inception. We're going to start and plan our project, and we're going to go define our requirements. I know on this slide, it's mentioned requirement specifications, but once again, whether you name it requirement specifications, whether you work with epics and user stories, whether you give it a different name, requirement specifications are nothing else than the expectations which an end user has. How you define them in which approach, whether it's in a V model or an Agile model, and how you name those expectations, that's up to you and your company to define as part of the approach you set up. Which brings us towards this iterative phase, which I explained in the previous slides, where you have the different sprints. The stabilization sprints will come to a certain moment to accept or not to come, let's say, towards a deployment towards the next environment. And the thing which makes it a little bit more complex in a regulated environment is we can't just implement, for example, a document management functionality. No, we need a document management functionality. We need an approval flow. We need an electronic signature as part of it. So even though we're working in an agile way, we need to be sure that whenever we release something towards the end users, towards productions, that it did this package of functionalities that's in line towards the regulations. And this is what is being shown in this model. So once we have such a package, I would say, we can go over towards, let's say, the more formal documented testing, and whether that testing is a manual test execution, whether that's part of a paperless validation system, whether you use their automated test activities, that's once again complete up to you. And I would invite you to be as lazy as possible. And if you can automate your test scripts, definitely do so. To come in the end to go and verify that the system meets your expectations, to go and verify your user requirements or your user stories, your epics as you define it within your company. To come to a release into production where we will still have to maintain the system. And the operational phase as part of a computerized system or as part of an equipment is actually more important than, let's say, the initial validations or any changes we apply to it. It's also the longest period. We need to maintain and look at access control. We need to maintain backups. Whenever we look at equipment, we have to look towards maintenance, towards calibration activities. So keep this in the bigger picture and ensure that you also have your relevant supporting processes in place as part of your operational phase to later on, whenever the system is no longer used, to go and retire that system and take it out of use, I would say. So first we started with the V model, then we had a look at the Agile model to come towards this incremental validation approach. If we translate this to the broader and the benefits of the Agile method, what can we see there? Well, if we look at value-wise, we are able to deliver step by step. We're able to deliver already little packages of functionality in line with the regulations, which can be started by the user. So we can add value to the business a lot faster. We're also limiting and spreading the risk by looking at it from the start. And the longer we will go on, the lower the risk levels will go, which will have a big benefit. And once again, is following on the key principle, a risk-based approach. It will also allow you to be more adaptable, because in the end, when we validate a computerized system or computerized software, we need to be assured that this system, this software, is working within the processes we define. We want to use it. And if it does not fit within the process we want to use it, we need to see to adapt the system. But the process should be leading there. By taking an agile approach, you will be able to adapt a lot quicker than to go and implement, let's say, in a V model in a waterfall approach. It's also a lot more visible given that you're constantly build up and release different, let's say, packages of functionality towards the end users, and who will also keep giving you feedback as part of that methodology. Which brings us then to how can we even more, let's say, or take the next steps. One of the things which CSA is saying is look towards automation and look towards your tools. They will really benefit and help you in the approach. Why? Well, what we saw in pharmaceutical manufacturing is that automation really helped to take away human error. Why not then automate the activities of a computerized system validation approach, where before we were creating our deliverables, our documents, either on paper or on digital paper, then I mean PDFs. Let's really look to go and use those tools as part of that approach, definitely in where we look towards an agile lifecycle model. I can't even think away the tools anymore to go and support and implement such an approach. To also help with the high volumes of test executions, especially automation due to repeatability, and will help with building up the traceability matrix as part of those different activities. So we talked about GAMP5. We talked about lifecycle models, development models. We went from agile to looking how can tools fit in there. And as I mentioned before, critical thinking is key of it. Even before we were talking about CSA, I started by repeating, let's say, the key principles which were defined as part of GAMP5. Well, critical thinking is the same when you look at that. So GAMP5 second edition really guides critical thinking during your validation effort. It promotes decision making to really look at the issues at hand and focus on them, and which makes you rely on your knowledge, the knowledge you have about the product, about the process, and how you can apply a scalable approach to go and validate this system as part of it. And in the next slide, this is even better visualized by showing that critical thinking is really looking to make fitness for intended use, which is our computer system validation, a risk-based approach, and the general multi-layered assurance, whether it's quality assurance or broader than that, IT security assurance, to come there to the ideal middle and to focus there on the most critical aspects and act on those. Look at the scenarios, identify the risks, and take action where required. So with this, I hope I gave you a little bit more knowledge, or at least a refresher towards validation lifecycle modules, more specifically the Agile method, and also how critical thinking is a key part of that process. And with this, I would like to give the word back to you, Silvia.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Very interesting, the points you brought to us. Thank you. Especially during the pandemic, some companies began to use electronic documents workflow through EDM, electronic document management. This choice is reasonable as many companies already employ EDM for approval process. This approach aligns well with the static nature of documents in the first part of the V model, which contrasts with the more dynamic testing phase in the second leg of the V model. Tests, I mean verification phase. However, EDMs don't manage tests effectively. They can't inspect the context of a test. This management process poses challenges. Users often need to access and modify already approved test scripts, which could lead to changes without following the proper process of a request amendment via an incident report. Additionally, EDMS lack of ability to track the progress or individual test step or outcomes. They can't facilitate the creation of incident reports to address test failure, including decisions to rerun tests, abort them, or modifying them for better alignment with process. This is precisely why a validation tool becomes necessary in these circumstances. What I'm referring to is a digital validation tool that encompasses not only the oversight and endorsement of components within validation deliverables, but also an oversight of testing procedures. Advantages of utilizing digital validation software within an Agile framework: enhance regulatory compliance, achieve greater alignment with the regulatory authorities such as FDA, EMA, WHO, and ANVISA. Automated traceability matrix. Automation simplifies the creation and the management of traceability matrices. Incremental release, adoption of partial release strategy on per sprint basis facilitates gradual system validation. Improved version control. Item-based version control enhances the ability to sustain a validated state. Unified validation approach employs a single validation plan along multiple partial reports for a cohesive approach. Swifter and cost-effective validations accelerate validation timelines while maintaining cost efficiency. Remote and paperless management enables remote work validation management and execution, eliminating the need for paper documentation. By leveraging digital validation software within an Agile framework, these benefits collectively contribute to a streamlined validation process, improve compliance, and overall operational efficiency. I'd like to demonstrate practical examples of utilizing software to enhance the creation of validation documents and streamline lifecycle management using Agile method. In the following scenario, the interface displays a compilation of deliverables and subsequently loads the user requirement specifications, URS, or the other name we can call this document. Notably, each requirement may exist in a distinct version. The next step involves accessing the specific item and providing a rationale for the alteration. Within this process, you have the option to input the change control number accountable for the requirement modification, accompanied by concise summary clarifying the rationale behind the change. Finally, you can authorize the justification for generate a new version, which will be subsequently undergo editing. Envision the benefit of utilizing pre-prepared validations, essentially libraries designed to expedite validation studies. These libraries can be consulted for a range of aspects, including requirement scenarios, potential risks to patient well-being and product quality, as well comprehensive tests for diverse validation and qualification studies. These research have already been completed for your convenience, yet they remain entirely customizable by aligning with your specific requirements. We have already talked about unscripted testing, that is testing approach that should be confused with lack of testing documentation strategy, while it embraces a more flexible testing process. It's crucial to recognize that certain data must still be documented to effectively demonstrate the test execution, both in the past or for future reference. Even within an unscripted testing approach, the importance of recording specific data cannot be understated. This data serves as a record of how the test was carried out, what actions were taken, and what outcomes were achieved. It acts as a valuable reference point not only for the current testing phase, but also for future iterations and enhancements. When it comes to scripted tests, it's worth noting that these tests don't demand excessive detail, especially in scenarios involving transactions or functionalities that are not deemed critical and carry minimal risk. The level of detail required for scripting can be tailored to match the significance and the complexity of the tested elements. This allows for a more efficient test process while still maintaining the necessary level of documentation to support testing integrity and traceability. Observe the significant simplification in conducting tests that have already received pre-approval. These tests are conveniently listed in the pending dashboard. A simple click on these pending items swiftly leads to the associated activity, such as a test application in this instance. On the displayed screen, the executor enters the test, confirms the necessary actions, completes the testing procedure, gathers supporting evidence, verifies the successful upload of said evidence, and ultimately approves the test. The process is remarkably straightforward and efficient. Displayed here is the visual representation of a traceability matrix, illustrating the interconnections between requirement, their corresponding risk scenarios, specifications, and test components. This particular deliverable serves as a central reference point for conducting keyword searches throughout the entirety of the validation study. Notably, the matrix incorporates color-coded indicators with red denoting in progress items and the blue indicating those that have been completed. The overarching goal is to achieve a state where all items are marked in blue at the earliest opportunity. This screen shows how to assemble a package. This is a feature where you put together which items will go to which specialist. It is as if you could separate your ask for approval by different specialists who master different processes. Packages are also used to be included in partial releases. Interesting functionality that allows a formal approval to release in a system to production. Utilizing a dedicated validation solution offers numerous benefits. Among these advantages is the system inherent comprehension of ongoing process, distinguishing between passed and failed tasks, which also managing pending issues. Additionally, the solution monitors commencement and conclusion dates for each phase test, incorporating incident summaries. All this data is compiled into a comprehensive report constructed through tagging techniques that draw information from the database. The resultant report takes on a formal structure, aligning with formats such as IQ or QPQ or UAT, SAT, and culminating in a final validation report. Once generated and approved, these reports are exported to PDF format, providing a familiar and conventional medium for reviewing the information. Concluding the contact with me meticulously assembled, I'd like to open the floor for any comments or questions that you may arise during this presentation, our QA session. Do we have questions, Lilian?
Yes, thank you everyone for your questions. We still have almost 10 minutes. So I'm going to select some questions and direct to Silvia and Jonathan. Let me take one here. So when Jonathan were commenting on critical thinking and leverage with suppliers, this interesting question came up. So let me read here. How do you balance critical thinking with a high turnover, potentially in outsourced tech company? Could you answer this question, Jonathan, please?
Definitely, but may I allow me to return a small question back or to make an assumption? When you, as part of the question, high turnover was defined. Do you mean then people coming starting at the company and leaving back the company, or do you mean something else? But assuming it's really, let's say, the change of people, which is understood under the high turnover. Critical thinking, although when you read it out or when you see it written, it's written as thoughts, it should be a process. It should be a process and it should be defined in several activities where the people should be trained in. And if you have this process defined, if you have the people trained, then I believe this will still work and be part of a general process and a supporting process, which will help you as part of those activities. I don't know, Silvia, if you have something to add towards that question, maybe?
Yes, when someone mentions critical thinking, in my mind, it comes to a risk assessment approach. So critical thinking has some, let's say, a strong relationship between the impact to patients or that integrate and product quality. So we need to focus on what really matters. So critical thinking is a new, let's say, a new approach for focus on what is really important. So when you have a very good function risk assessment, it is easier to justify a critical thinking why you are doing in a format, but the previous one you didn't use that format. It changes between one validation to another validation stud, but we can change our mind and we can use the technology in our favor, but using function risk assessment is a very good tool to drive this critical thinking. In my mind, this is a kind of pair, in my mind. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. As you showed us the user requirement, an example, I think you can answer this question. Jonathan can complement as well, Silvia. Requirements specification after a couple of interactions could end up being a long document with all the changes that were ever affected a requirement. Are there any techniques to keep the requirements specification as a document as clean as possible? Thanks.
It's a very good point and question. Actually, when you ask this kind of question, in my mind, it comes with the how detailed we need to have an URS. And actually depends on how the system categorization goes up. So if we are using approach for an available technological system available in the market, an off-the-shelf system, so the URS needs to be in a more high-level approach. And as we need to build according to our own needs, we need to go into details. So I don't know if I answered the question, but we can also have a high-level requirement to define a sprint, and we come to the next iteration. Sometimes it changes. We need to come back to review the requirement if it changed, basically. But the detail is according to what you were customizing or configuring in the system. Please let us know if I answered your question. Thank you so much.
Maybe if I can add one thing to it. What I remembered from the question is how can you keep a document as clean as possible? I think here looking at the solution and looking at your item-based versioning of your user requirements, this will allow you a lot more cleaner approach, clean traceability, and that will also definitely help as part of that issue.
Perfect.
Yes, even because it just a comment, thank you, Janet. Regarding to the clean part of the document, if you don't go straight to the point in a requirement, it goes to be a kind of stone in the validation in team, because they, in some way, they are going to test something that the requirement is not asking for. So that's why we need to be clean and go straight to the point in terms of a requirement.
Yeah, in terms of long documents, when we use GAMP5, for example, or software, we can have many different documents for each iterative part. So I can have a long with all the parts and just the new one that you are adding. So we can have these automatic, and we have the traceability matrix and the history as well to help us. Okay, let me just add some question here. Let me go here. Here I have one. According to the presentation, Agile method fit best with software development that onboard system development. Will be difficult for a company to accept our equipment without any functionality developed. In this case, do you think it's the best to apply a most traditional validation approach?
Okay, great. Okay. So the question is regarding that sometimes we can't accept the equipment, the piece of equipment that is standard, but sometimes we need to add some custom or configurable functions, right? So it's possible to balance in a validation method, the off-the-shelf part and the customized part. So we need to go deeper and focus mainly in the customized part. So we need to clarify and go deeper in the requirements of this part of the system, because the rest of the piece of equipment there is a lower risk when it comes, it's not the first time it is being used. So the probability for us to have a problem in the customized part is bigger. So we need, in order to clarify the categorization, regulatory bodies like to check that you build a validation plan with the higher categorization. But in the end of the day, in the risk assessment, functional risk assessment, you can give much more attention to the customized part. Even you have 80% of the piece of equipment in a very standard way. And I remember Jonathan mentioned about leverage. It's very likely the supplier has a set of documents for the standard part. So it's important to leverage and mention their documentation to prove that the test was already, has already been running. So you don't need to repeat all of them. So this is a typical example of critical thinking. This is very specific to that validation approach, but you can apply this kind of critical thinking and drive the details in the risk of the functional risk assessment. I don't know if Jonathan agree with me, but
I don't have anything to add on this question.
Thank you.
Okay. Edson has added a comment about the high turnover he mentioned. Complementing the question about the high turnover, the main challenge is to establish a very well-defined process and get assured that the acknowledgement was widely disclosed between all involved. Okay,
yes, it is, yeah. Actually, when we talk about a digital validation approach, there is a chance to minimize this problem. Turnover is not something easy to face in my point of view. At 5 Validation, we face this kind of challenge, and I suppose the QBD also faces this kind of challenge. And training is a key part. Validation is a key tool to knowledge management. ISP has a guide to guide pharmaceutical industries and medical devices industry how to deal with the knowledge management, because when you lose a coworker, you lose knowledge as well. So when you have a very well structured way to proceed with the validation studies, it is a kind of blast. That's why we start in work in the past with libraries, because we faced this kind of challenge. So we don't need to keep only the knowledge when our coworkers are working right now. So we can build libraries, public and private ones. Public is in our software is when 5 builds the validation libraries, or let's say templates, including content, and we publish for all clients. And each client can build their own libraries. So libraries is a kind of way to minimize this problem. So when you use a software, is a way to have a very well structured to conduct the validation study. When you have the knowledge very well structured, include in it into libraries, is a way to minimize the problem. When you have trainings, for example, monthly trainings, so you keep the knowledge inside home. So there, in my opinion, there is no magic way to deal with this very high challenge, but using 3 or 4 approaches, you combine everything, you can achieve a better situation for turnover. Turnover is not easy to face.
Okay, so the time's up, but we have many questions here. So since we don't have more time, I would just select just one question because it's really fast and we can answer later one by one, okay? Is your solution, it's a SaaS-based, is validated GXP?
Yes, SaaS-based and validated GXP. Of course, you have some custom configuration that you need to run some tests, but we guide how to do it. So it is, yeah. Okay, great. I'd like to let you know that we are going to pursue all the questions, and we are going to organize some answers by email, or if you have some doubts about your questions, we are going to suggest a meeting. The idea is not leaving some questions here unanswered, okay? Okay, great. So it's a wonderful experience to be here with all of you. I genuinely appreciate it and everyone for being here, dedicating your time and giving us your attention. I'd like to extend a special thanks to my coworker Lilian and Jonathan Boa from QBD Group for his valuable contribution. Jonathan, you'd like to advise something valuable just to end this webinar, and leave your email, please.
Thank you for the part, and I also don't want to hold up everyone else. So very knowledgeable. Glad to have been a part of it.
Okay, great. And you'd like to leave general QBD email for our audience to be in contact?
If anyone have questions, they can reach out to me by jonathan.boel@qbdgroup.com.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want to express my gratitude for our dedicated colleagues. There are some more co-workers behind it: Amanda Nogueira, Giovanna Peretti, Bruna Barros, Gabriel Lara, and Mateus Viana. Your support has been instrumental in making this event a success. Thank you again to everyone. I look forward to our next encounter. Goodbye.
Bye.